Mic check 1 2. Happy Tuesday morning to you. It is September 17th and I'm coming at you with another article. This one's coming from Bloomberg, which kind of speaks to something that I've been talking about for quite some time when it comes to modern day consoles and the advancements that we're seeing in the technology or lack thereof. Coming from a generation where we went from 8-bit graphics to 16-bit graphics to 32-bit, and then we enter, the polygon, the 3D era, and then we get to the PlayStation 2 where it's more refined, and then we get to pretty much this PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 era where the advancements are not as clear. It's not as distinguishable as it was between 4th to 5th and then 5th to 6th. It seems like everything since the 7th generation and then moving forward hasn't really been that much. There hasn't been much of a wow factor for the gamers out there who genuinely care about things like graphics and things like that. And so, for a while I thought it was just me, because I couldn't understand for the life of me why people were making such a big deal over even the PlayStation 4 and now the PlayStation 5, when I personally didn't see enough of a difference in the graphics to warrant such a fuss. Now, if you're talking performance and frame rates and things like that, then yeah, I'm sure those, the machines that we're getting today are far more powerful than the ones that we got 5 to 10 years ago. But from a graphics perspective, I'm really not seeing anything too crazy. And so we have this article here by Jason Schreier, came out on the 13th, and he's talking about this. And this is what he says. He says, "Hi everyone, today we're trying to figure out why the PS5 Pro feels so unnecessary. But first, this week's top gaming news." And then he mentions the entire staff of Annapurna Interactive resigned, Xbox cut 650 more jobs, which is pretty crazy. And then he has some other developments there, but then he starts to talk about the diminishing returns. And he says the most striking thing about this week's PlayStation 5 Pro reveal wasn't the internal power or sticker price, although that one was pretty shocking. It was the games. In a 9-minute presentation revealing the new iteration of the PS5 and touting its impressive hardware specs, lead architect Mark Cerny showed footage of games including The Last of Us Part 2, Ghost of Tsushima, Hogwarts Legacy, Horizon Forbidden West, and Gran Turismo 7. One common factor? They were all also released on the PlayStation 4 and looked perfectly fine on the 2013 console. Another common factor? They all have incredible graphics, despite most of the games being years old. Many video game enthusiasts have noticed over the last few years that graphics have reached a point of diminishing returns. Gone are the days of primitive avatars and chunky monsters. Today, most video games hit a level of graphical fidelity so vivid and realistic that it is hard not to marvel at the pores on a hero's face or the way that the blades of grass sway in the wind. It's become redundant to say that a modern game has great graphics, the way we might have in the 90s or early 2000s. These days, they all do. In the past, each console generation brought forward massive leaps in technology. Going from the PlayStation 1 to the PlayStation 2 was a revelation, transforming blocky angles and deformed faces into characters and buildings that popped onto the screen. By the mid-2000s, you had to start squinting to see the yearly graphical improvements. Nowadays, they barely exist. Red Dead Redemption 2, released 6 years ago for the PlayStation 4, might still be the best looking video game on the market. This is all fine. Games do not need to keep making vast graphical improvements when they could instead be pursuing innovation in other ways. But watching Cerny's presentation was a reminder that despite the giddy excitement over ray tracing and reflective surfaces, the graphical improvements brought by the newest console on the market are insignificant. The $700 PlayStation 5 Pro will certainly appeal to the tech aficionados with lots of disposable income who want to play games at 4K resolution and the highest frame rates possible. But most people will not be able to tell the difference between Final Fantasy VII Rebirth running on PS5 or PS5 Pro. It's gorgeous either way. It's enough to make you wonder, do we really need new consoles? The makers of PlayStation rely on continual iterations of hardware in order to grow their business, but how much longer will the appetite be there? The PS5 has failed to beat the PS4's growth and is lagging behind it on sales, at least in part because so many players are sticking with older, less graphically intensive games such as Fortnite and Grand Theft Auto Online that can be played on old consoles. An industry downturn and lack of big-name exclusive games also don't help. Meanwhile, rival Xbox seems to have given up on selling consoles in the first place. Maybe. Nobody really knows what Xbox is doing. Meanwhile, the most popular console on the market is the Nintendo Switch, which has sold 143 million units despite having graphical capabilities equivalent to a PS3. Its successor, expected to be released next year, will likely also be underpowered compared to its competitors and will also likely outsell them all. The Switch's success stems from many factors, including the fact that it's the only console that allows you to play beloved Nintendo franchises such as Mario and Zelda. But it also makes clear that the graphical arms race has limited appeal, and that times have changed. The majority of video game fans are no longer chasing the hottest technology above all else. The PS5 Pro doesn't feel like the console of the future. It feels like the vestige of a rapidly disappearing past. So when you listen to this article, he does an amazing job of summing up pretty much what I've been feeling and what I've been saying on the channel for probably close to the last year, which is that PlayStation has gotten it right because they understand that gamers just want to play games, and they have the games that gamers want to play. And so they concentrate on what's been working well for them for decades, and they just continue to refine that. I didn't realize that the Switch had graphical, capabilities equivalent to the PS3. I thought that was actually pretty funny when I read that. But when you, start to zero in and look at the Switch, you realize, this article's pretty on par, because Switch graphics are nothing compared to what you would even see on like a PlayStation 4. I remember when I started playing Ghost of Tsushima on the PlayStation 4, and I was just amazed at just all of the details in that game, from the changing of the weather to just the impressive graphical expressions on the characters' faces, the grimaces when they were experiencing pain. You can see the facial expressions of shock and different things like that, and just even also the attention to the detail with the landscapes and the surroundings, like he says in the article, the blades of grass. All of those things become more relevant and pertinent when you're playing a game that's kind of like open world and puts you through a number of different environments in different seasons, in different landscapes, because you want to really try to make those things as realistic as possible. Not to mention changing of weather, when clouds come in and it's raining versus when the sun is shining versus when the sun is setting, all of the different colors that the sky takes on as the sun is setting, the pastel blues and pinks and oranges. So all of those things matter, but from what we're seeing, we're not really seeing anything unique, anything special when we look at the PlayStation 5 Pro. And so it's really going to become more important for, I think, companies like Sony to concentrate on, like I said, either better software, meaning better games, or they need to start looking at creating a much more differentiated experience outside of just the graphics. From what I understand, the VR2 was a massive failure. I'm not sure why. I haven't done my research into that, but I think if Sony can really lean in to creating a top tier virtual reality experience, I feel like that's the edge that they would have over the competition if they're going to focus on technology. I think, like the article says, I think the days of people really caring about consoles are pretty much over. Because I don't think the expectations are really there. The next step really is just creating live action video games where you're just controlling what looks like live action real people. And then once you get to that point, it gets no more realistic than that. And I feel like that's really like the last step, where you're playing a video game that actually looks like a live action movie. And then beyond that, then what? Then I think you really have to transition into virtual reality, and how deep we go with that, only the future will tell us that, right? My mind, and for those of you who follow the channel, I'm into all kinds of sci-fi stuff. I'm a huge fan of The Matrix and things like that. And one of the shows that I've watched in the past, one of my favorites on Netflix is Black Mirror. And if you've ever had a chance to watch Black Mirror, there's an episode starring, I think is it Anthony Mackie or Jonathan Mackie? I can't remember his name. He plays Falcon in the Avengers movies, but that guy is in there. And in the movie, he and his best friend grow up playing a game that, in my opinion, looks a lot like Tekken, but it's called some other game. You know, they have to give it a generic name, copyright, so on and so forth. And, you know, they grow up playing this game on, I guess, whatever would have been a PlayStation 4, PlayStation 3. And then 20 years later, you know, he's now in his 30s or 40s, and his best friend sends him a birthday gift. And the birthday gift happens to be this 20-year advanced version of the game, where instead of like putting in a disc and playing on the controls, you have like this, basically like this little device that you attach to your temple. And when the game starts, you essentially fall into like this comatose state where you neurologically enter the game, and no controllers are needed because you're controlling everything in your mind. And you know, you're basically fully immersed in the game. You know, you feel all the hits, you smell the environment, you hear all the sounds, and you're just completely immersed in the experience. And I genuinely do not feel like that is a far-fetched, I don't feel like that's a far-fetched future. I feel like that future is closer than we think for two reasons. The first reason is because when you look at something like the Apple Vision Pro, if you've never experienced that, it's very expensive. So I don't expect everyone to go out and buy that. But if you've never experienced it, I strongly suggest you take yourself to your nearest Apple store and just let them know you want to take a demo of the Apple Vision Pro. And when you experience that, you will see how immersive the Apple Vision Pro truly is. And then aside from that, scientists have been working on technology that would allow like a paraplegic to type using their mind, using their thoughts. For those with disabilities that, you know, have completely immobilized them, they're coming up with technology that will allow those individuals to control electronics with their thoughts. And I've watched videos on it. The technology is still, you know, being advanced, and they practiced it, I think, on, you know, they trialed it. I can't remember if they trialed it on animals or not. But I know that there is at least one person who they've used this technology on, and it's basically a chip that they implant in their brain, and then that chip basically acts as a receiver to the software. And then that, you know, that individual who's completely immobilized, they're able to type out messages using the chip that's implanted. And so you have to think, you know, if that's where we're at right now, I mean, the sky is the limit. Technology is growing at quantum leaps, at an exponential rate. And I do not believe that we are that far away from it. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you think this is all far out there. Am I lost in the matrix or lost in the sauce? And let me know what you think about the PS5 Pro and this diminishing returns on graphics. It's the Y2K Collector. Here's your news for today. Take it easy.